Hello, everyone. Welcome to Love That Lasts, the relationship podcast. And on today's episode, I will be visiting with author and speaker Gary Thomas. Gary is writing and speaking and focusing on bringing people closer to Christ and closer to others. He is the author of over 21 books that together have sold 2 million copies and have been translated into more than a dozen languages. Gary's speaking ministry has led him to speak in all 50 states and 9 different countries and on numerous national television and radio programs. Gary enjoys in his spare time, which I don't know how he has it, but in his spare time, he enjoys running, has completed 14 marathons, including the Boston Marathon 3 times. And he and his wife, Lisa, have been married for 41 years, blessed with 3 children and 2 grandchildren. Wow, what a wonderful intro. Gary, welcome today to Love That Lasts. So glad to have you on our episode today.
Thank you, Heidi. Good to see you again.
Good, you too. Yeah, we were talking earlier. About 10 years ago, you came to Abilene Christian University and spoke at a marriage event. And it is just delightful to have you back on Love That Lasts. So I wanted to also just say for our listeners, this interview is really special to me because your books on parenting and marriage have really been influential. As a parent, as a wife, I think it was Sacred Parenting years ago when we were just starting our own journey. Now my son is 21, the oldest, but
Wow.
someone gave us that Sacred Parenting book and we were like, whoa, this is good. And it's been one that we have shared and used in a lot of capacities. Also, I use especially a lot of your marriage material when I do marriage retreats and seminars for churches. And a relationship class that I have here at ACU, I incorporate some of that material. But funny enough, Gary, so this just happened maybe 2 weeks ago. I was running into one of my former students that took a relationship class, and he has since gotten married to another young woman, also was in my class. They didn't meet in that class, but they just really have fallen in love with your work. And he told me that they had attended some event that you spoke at not long ago, I think got to meet you. And I said, well, guess what? He's going to be on our podcast, Love That Last. And his mouth kind of dropped. So you have really kind of
Uh,
reached some rock star status with some college students. And so I love that. And I was just excited we're going to get to have this conversation today.
Thank you, Heidi.
Absolutely. Okay, so maybe just to give our readers a little more insight about your journey as you've really made a career within writing and speaking about relationships. How did you kind of get into this career and this niche with talking about relationships?
Yeah. It's sort of the kindness and mercy of God. Not sort of. It was completely the kindness and mercy of God. I'm a man of very limited talents. There's not much anybody would pay me for. I have no mechanical ability. I don't like to be in charge with people. I'm not very good with numbers. When my wife was trying to teach our youngest daughter math, she said, honey, everybody needs to know math. And my daughter said, Dad doesn't know math and he's done pretty well. So my kids recognized that if this writing thing didn't work out, I was going to be in trouble. And so I wrote 3 books. The first 3 books were really on spiritual formation, how we're shaped in Christ. Um, and the one subsequently has broken out and has gotten pretty wide reading, Sacred Pathways, different ways that we connect with God. They didn't break any records or anything like that. But one thing I noticed was that God had used my marriage to shape me more than any of the spiritual disciplines that the classical writers would talk about. And I wasn't qualified as a therapist or a psychologist or a counselor, but I did want to write about how marriage can be used to shape us. And it was just a new approach. And I think because I wasn't coming as a counselor trying to solve your problems, I could be pretty honest. And I talked about the difficulties of marriage, but how God uses the difficulties and the hope we have in that whatnot. And for whatever reason, it just took off.
Mm.
I went back and wrote another book on spiritual formation, which got a gold medallion, which they only give one of those away a year, but the sales weren't particularly impressive. And so the publishing world pretty much is, look, Gary, you had a hit here. Let's go with that. And so they just wanted me
Mhm.
to do relationship books. And
Stay in your lane, so to speak.
I kind of found myself like a baker who wanted to make croissants, spiritual formation, and an audience that said, no, just give us the donuts. And so
Mm.
all of the relational books just sold really, really well. And so those kept going. Now, I feel like I've finally reached a point after a couple decades. I don't want to keep writing the same book. So I'm
Mm.
going back to some spiritual formation books. Um, but yeah, it was quite the journey, really born out of what I lacked. I'm not a counselor, I'm not a psychologist, so I just look at it very differently. I wasn't really competing with a lot of the books out there that were written by experts. I just had a different angle, and people apparently were looking for that.
Yeah, well, that angle has worked because, again, your Sacred Marriage book has sold, what, 1 million copies. It is one of those books that what I love about it is it's not just this how to, it's really this transforming work that marriage can do in our lives. And I think as you spoke about that in your own marriage, you kind of opened that up for readers to see that perspective, which I think has caught on, obviously. So I guess you can go back and your kids now believe that you've made a good career as a writer for sure. So, Gary, as we kind of unpack some material today for our listeners around relationships, this is a whole podcast, devoted to love that lasts. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on our show is you do bring this wealth of insight and expertise in many of the different stages of relationship development. Your books have kind of covered kind of this really beautiful kind of journey of how a book about searching and dating and maybe looking to be able to have a love forever, as well as books that talk about preparing for marriage. And then once you're married, how do you really build this lifelong loving commitment as a follower of Jesus? And so your books just cover so many things about relationships. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you as we discuss some of that, because we're going to have listeners that maybe they're looking for a relationship or they're dating, or maybe they're entering into the season of premarital, or maybe they've been married for many decades. And I think you have so much to offer for all. So, with that, let's talk a little bit about the dating stage for a moment.
Yes, yes.
One of the books that you wrote, entitled Sacred Search, is geared a bit more towards those who are dating or looking to have a loving relationship. What might be a few takeaways from this book, Gary, that you could share with our listeners who are wanting and interested in pursuing a dating relationship, and really, though, this kind of healthy, Christ formed way?
Yeah. Well, I wrote the Sacred Search for a couple of reasons. First, I believe a well-chosen marriage that's spiritually profitable is one of the closest things to heaven that we'll get on this earth. It's rich, it's life-giving. On the other hand, as a pastor, I worked with a lot of marriages where I know a foolishly chosen marriage between mismatched people and wrong kind of mismatching can feel as close to hell as you might get on this earth. And it goes on. And so I really try to tell singles, whether I'm talking by singles now, I know that's an outdated word. I could be talking to people 40 and divorced or widowed
True.
or 30 or 25 looking to first get married. But I'm just saying, this is such a consequential choice. You've got to apply wisdom and discernment and make a good one. Sometimes people want to rush into it. I've told so many singles, wouldn't you rather be well and happily married for 45 years than rush into a marriage and be in a frustrating marriage for 50? It
Wow.
might feel like it's forever when you're 30 and not married yet. That doesn't mean that you throw caution to the wind and just get married for the sake of getting married. And so I wrote that book because I found that Christian singles were getting married for the same reason as non-Christian singles, none of which really predicted future marital happiness. And the three big things that I would see talking to couples is one, that that all overpowering infatuation.
Right.
Um, I've never felt this way before. It leads us to crazy things. Neuroscientists call it to idealization, where you actually are creating somebody who doesn't exist. You're
Mm.
missing the red flags that everybody else sees because you're so happy to be in love. All you can see is the good and you're blinded to the bad. We know that that lasts about 12 to 18 months at most and it fades. So it's not a good reason to get married. The second one is sexual chemistry. They don't want to just have an emotional relationship. They'd very much like it to get physical, which is a wonderful part of marriage. But if you talk to a couple that's been married for a long time, that initial sexual chemistry doesn't foretell future happiness in the marital bedroom any more than initial infatuation presumes future emotional closeness. Physical intimacy is built by the quality of the relationship, by the character of each individual. I know some people will laugh at this, Heidi, but virtue,
Mm,
kindness, compassion, not holding on to grudges, being willing to forgive, wanting to serve, wanting to give so that you receive so that you can give to your spouse. All of those things are often what fuel that ultimate satisfaction in marital intimacy. And third, I call it date compatibility. They like to do the same things on dates. They have fun. They go out to the same kind of foods. But what I would caution people with is all that tells you is how well you'll do on vacation.
right.
And most of
Right.
our friends don't go on vacation, but a couple times a year. Um, and even if the sexual chemistry is high, let me go back to that one. It's less than 1% of your marriage if you look at the time. And so if it is off the charts wonderful, but 99% of the marriage is a horror show, that's not going to overcome it. On the other hand, if it's rather satisfying but not all consuming, but the rest of the marriage is life giving and fun and fulfilling and spiritually purposeful, you're still going to feel like you're in a good place. And so, if all three of those things were present, infatuation, sexual chemistry, date compatibility, we found a match and let's go. But none of them, or even all of them together, predict how marriage is going to be when it's about living life together, raising
Right.
kids together, growing in the Lord together. And so I just want them to apply Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Find somebody that you can grow in righteousness with. Find somebody that you can share spiritual purpose with. That's what I think will set you up for a solid marriage.
Yeah, those are excellent points. Wow. I think anyone who is wanting to go about this dating process well can draw insight from those three things that you have just mentioned. And as you just said, Gary, you were noticing that this is not much different from Christian couples versus who are non-Christian, right? Is that
Right.
we live in a culture that really does romanticize this idea of falling in love. And the reality is that that's a feeling, but it doesn't always mean it's going to take us the long way.
I've had Heidi so many couples that have come up to me and they got married after reading The Sacred Search. And some of them were quite honest. This person didn't do it for me. I didn't have those infatuated feelings. But you challenged me to look at this differently, and I can't thank you enough. I'm so
Mm,
glad we did. This has been so great. I would have been blind to what could have been a great marriage, and that is so satisfying to
I
see
bet.
when people said, we don't think we would have seen each other, considered each other until we really, well, we became convinced. We looked at the science, we looked at the scriptures and said, there might be something to this.
Right. And what a beautiful thing to kind of have them tell you that. Because when you're in that writing phase, you're not sure how it's going to
Yeah.
fall in terms of how people receive it. But this is stuff that is transforming people's lives about how they are making decisions around dating and marriage. I love it. My oldest son read it and just
Mm.
had great things to say about that as well. All right. So, Gary, still talking a little bit about kind of the dating phase or someone looking for a loving relationship. I wanted to reference an article that you had posted on your site talking about singles and how to find a master level love. And it was referring to some work by a doctor who had done some practice within a nursing facility. And there was an older couple by the name of Henry and Martha that had been married for decades. And they were now in their 90s. And as often the case in nursing facilities, they were in separate beds. But each night, the gentleman Henry would ask one of the male orderlies to move him into Martha's bed, and so the doctor kind of wrote about this, and you talked a bit about this master level love. Could you kind of speak to that as we think about just the search for a loving relationship to last a
Yeah.
lifetime?
If we had 2 hours, if we were doing a Joe Rogan thing, we could talk about all the delightful stages of a
Yes.
relationship. We could hit infatuation. I'm not anti-infatuation. God created our brains. I believe there's a purpose behind it. Enjoy it. It can be wonderful. But infatuation is based on insecurity and often play acting.
Mm.
You're so enthralled with this person, you're putting up your best front. Um, and it can go on. I had one bride that confessed to me after her honeymoon that on the first night of the wedding, she woke up and brushed her hair and brushed her teeth and got back in bed so her husband would think that's what she looks like and smells like in the morning. Um, After 35 years of marriage, that's not going to fly. Your spouse is going to know what you do that. And they've done studies where, infatuation is a high time. But then when you start to have kids, satisfaction can really go down. So, like the first 20 years of marriage can be really difficult. But couples who stay in and keep building that relationship by their 35th wedding anniversary often experience the same level of satisfaction and happiness with each other they did as newlyweds, but it's deeper. Their minds have formed around each other. They're at rest in each other's presence. They have shared memories. That
Right.
sense of oneness has really hit because that actual sense of oneness, again, that's been studied. That takes about 10 to 15 years. So you've got infatuation, excitement of building things, disillusionment. Oneness can come in at about 15 years, but then you're tired, you're raising kids. If you get to 35, and this happened with Lisa and I, you really start to hit this sweet spot of marriage. I
Mm.
wrote Sacred Marriage. What if God designed marriage to make us holy more than to make us happy as a subtitle when we've been married for 15 years. I wrote Cherish when we've been married about 35 years. And Cherish is sort of the idealistic view of love. Sacred marriage is sort of the realistic. And so you get to this place where you have this couple that just want to be together, and that's the master level of love. They've gone through the difficult years. They've worked through the issues. They've stayed there at times when feelings were down. I would tell singles, this isn't universal, but it's near universal. Most couples I talk to, even ones with tremendous marriages, will tell me there was a time when they would say, we weren't sure we were going to make it.
Mm.
And they're terrified now. They love being together. They can't imagine life apart from each other. And so I think this just points to a vision for couples, this master level of love that even if times are difficult and feelings have faded or whatnot, you keep growing the relationship, you build the relationship, and you have this point where at the end of your life, you can be in a nursing home. You're not surrounded by a house that you built or all of your possessions, but if you can be with your loved one at night, that's all you need. And
Mm.
it's a very special thing, and it's fun to experience. I've taught that every marriage is difficult in its own way. But I think in some ways, um, it would be harder for me to write that now, 41 years into my marriage. We
Mm.
still have difficulties because we're still sinners. I still
Sure.
confront my sin. My wife confronts hers. But yeah, we're in a cherishing marriage where it's just hard to even imagine life apart from each other.
Yeah. I love that you cast that vision even for people in their single period or early on, even dating, is to give them perspective. Again, back to a culture that pushes a lot about infatuation, attraction, falling in love. We don't put ourselves in the best position to think about longevity and how do you cultivate a relationship over time. So I love that idea of a master level love. And your book, Sacred Search, I think to anyone out there dating, looking for a relationship, this is a great one to really go and buy. Okay, Gary, let's move into the category of relationship development about those who are engaged. Another one of your books that you wrote is Nine Essential Conversations Before You Say I Do. What are some of the important conversations that you see couples needing to have before they get married?
The most important conversation is the one the couple doesn't want to have.
Oh, what is that? Tell us
Well,
now.
that's right. It could be any of the nine, and
That's
we really
right.
get into it. Heidi, what I realize is the best gift I can give a couple um, is to say, I really have concerns. I want you guys to think through this, or to say, I can give you my blessing. And the purpose of that book is taking them through the 9 conversations. I did it with with a counselor, Dr. Steve Wilkie, and his wife, Dr. Rebecca Wilkie. He's been in marriage and family ministry for 40 years. And we said, these are the issues that are going to come up in a counseling office. So let's talk about it beforehand. What do you mean when you say marriage? Marriage is sort of like exercise. Some people say exercise and they're going on a treadmill. Some are running a marathon. Some are playing volleyball. Some are
Right.
playing golf and calling that exercise. So, but
Different language to speak. Yeah.
yeah. So when marriage, you think you're gonna work together? Do you think you're gonna have separate weekends? Are you always gonna go on? I mean, there are just a lot of different ways to look at marriage. And so we look at that. What do you mean by covenant marriage? And it's not a contract. It means
Mhm.
I'm in this. Divorce isn't an option. Now, of course, if there's rampant adultery, if there's abuse, if there are issues like that, um, that's a difference. But nothing that I'm going to do unilaterally is going to bring this to an end. We get into finances. I have them share credit reports. I don't need to see it. But if you're afraid to share a credit report with a future spouse, there could be some real issues because when you marry your spouse, you're marrying their credit. If you want to
So would
buy
that
a
be like
house, or,
would that be a red flag then if someone was not wanting to share that?
yeah, yeah, I wouldn't. I would pull back as the pastor. But then we talk about what motivates them. I found some people are motivated by saving, some people are motivated by giving, some people are motivated by spending, right?
True.
And so if you've got somebody who's motivated by saving and somebody who's motivated by spending and sometimes by giving, you got to help. Well, okay, so what does that mean? How much can you spend without um, without being upset? How can your future spouse spend without you feeling like you take offense? Or do you have the same goal? Some might say, we want to give away $1 million before we're 60. Some might say, we want to have $1 million in our retirement fund. And so you're just trying to see, are you on the same page? And I was really struck by this, Heidi, because when people are infatuated, I'm astonished at the conversations they don't have. I had a
Mhm.
young man come up to me one time, earnest young man, been married 9 months. He said, Gary, you got to help me out. I've always thought that I would go to Japan and be a missionary, um, and been married for 9 months. And now my wife says she never wants to leave the Midwestern town that her parents are in. And I don't know what to do. And I asked him, well, did you not talk about this before you got married? And he said, well, we thought we had. You know, they were
Oh.
infatuated. They rushed into it. And I had to tell him the hard news. I said, you know what? Um, she wins. No mission board will send a wife to Japan if she doesn't want to go. It would be a disaster for you. You've committed to marrying her. Maybe you can find a mission work in the Midwest. There are options that you could do, or move to a nearby community where you can do that. But this is the kind of thing that you really have to discuss ahead of time. And then they don't know this, but in the book, I'm kind of setting them up. What are 3 things that you'll never accept from a future spouse? I asked one guy, one woman, um, what do you want to become? And she kept talking about her mom. I love my mom. I think she's incredible. I think she's wonderful. And it came out in about week 8 or 9 because we get into it. We'll meet about 12 times. He despised her mom.
Oh.
He thought she was in her faith, and I pointed out to her, you want to become the woman that this man despises. And
Wow. Ouch.
her eyes were just opened up. And I just said, and um, ultimately I told that couple I couldn't do the wedding. I said, we can keep working on this. I can't do it the date that you have set. You're going to have to talk to someone else to do it because I take that blessing very
Mm,
seriously.
right.
I do believe God can use a difficult marriage, but I don't want people to choose what I know will be a marriage that looks like it's doomed to fail. If you can ask a couple hard questions. So um, we get into finances, we get into parenting, how many kids win. If you can't have kids, how desperate are you? Will you spend everything you have to do that? Are you okay with adoption? We get into conflict resolution. Some people really enjoy conflict. Some
Mm,
people run from it. We get into physical intimacy.
mm,
All of those issues, what the past and the comfortable, they need to know. And often it's spiritual counsel to say the level of sharing about the past. How do you process the past? I had one couple, the guy was a virgin. His wife wasn't. She'd had a long-term relationship with another guy for 2 years. And I could see he was struggling. And so my job as a pastor was to pull him aside and say, look, you don't have to marry her if this is really hard for you. If you always thought you would marry a virgin, that's not wrong. There are other people you can marry. I said, but if you marry her, you must never bring this up or make her feel like she's used goods or make her feel like you've been cheated or something. I said, if you can't carry this load, it's better that you not marry her than
Mm,
deny that it's a big deal. Go ahead and marry her, and it's really going to cause issues down the line. Now, he got through it and it worked out. And it was okay. But sometimes they just need permission. Oh,
right.
I you don't
Well,
have to do this, but here's what it means if you do that.
yeah, and I think what you're bringing up is really important because what you said earlier, when couples are in this infatuation stage and they're not thinking as clearly, right? Because there is a lot of, and it's beautiful attraction. There's going to be normal infatuations when you're kind of beginning to really like someone and feel attracted to someone. But during that stage, it's also really important not to make big decisions, like you just said, around kind of marriage, because it
Yes.
can be very easy to overlook some of these things that need to be talked about. So, what I love about this book is the fact that it's really trying to give people a roadmap to say, hey, when you are in these stages of dating and now you're getting married and you're engaged, you got to talk about things that often people want to avoid. And so you give them a roadmap and be like, here, let's talk about these things, which are going to be a blessing, even though they may be hard. There is a blessing in being able to address things and not to avoid them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm curious then, when it comes to like premarital counseling, what's kind of your take on that, Gary? Do you think it's something that any engaged couple should do, or is it just only for couples who are experiencing problems?
Yeah. Let me one up that. I like pre-engagement counseling.
Ah, okay, there. Okay, speak to that.
I, but here's my thing. And what do I know? I've been married 41 years. I'm so out of it. I got married very young. Um,
But you
but
got 21 books under your belt and a
yeah,
41-year marriage. I think you can speak to it.
but courtship was a big thing a while back, and the whole I kiss dating goodbye and whatnot. And what I saw that do, we didn't have that with our kids, um, is that it put so much pressure on people had to decide that they're going to marry this person to get to know them. And so I think, and look, this might ruffle some feathers, but I'll just say it in my experience, dating to get to know someone and getting to know what you like and the kind of personalities and who you are, I think it's personally fine if you have two guardrails. Watch your hands, watch your touching, and watch your words.
Mm,
Two words you can't take back, love and marriage. When those enter the conversation, a lot of hurt is there. But if you have two people up front saying, hey, we enjoy spending time together, we're getting to know each other, we're not touching inappropriately, we're not talking, we're not leading each other on.
right.
And then even if you're having feelings, maybe you're dampening those down. You're not expressing it because you don't know if you can follow through. But then I think once you've gotten to know this person, then you can enter an exclusive dating relationship. And then you're saying, okay, how do we do in a relationship? What do I think of this person's character? How are we getting in situations? Is she a taker or a giver? Can he handle conflict without getting physical? What's his spiritual temperature? And then that's when I think at a certain point you say, this could go to marriage.
Has potential.
Pre-engagement counseling is when you think, if this works out, I think I want to marry this person. The reason pre-engagement is helpful, because you can use that same book, Nine Essential Conversations,
Mm-hmm.
because once you give the date and send out
Mm,
invitations, it takes so much courage to pull back and say, I'm not going to go through with this.
well
In
said.
the Sacred Search, I talk about mercy marriages. I have talked to well, just a sad number of people where they told me, I knew on my wedding day I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But my
Mm,
parents had paid money. I didn't want to hurt this person. I didn't want to embarrass them. And they went through with the wedding because it would have been a hard conversation. And so pre-engagement, you can deal with all of these issues before you get engaged. And then my thought is once you're engaged, get married.
Mm,
I know it's hard for some women because they want all of it, but fine. But if you're married, if your relationship is really growing, there should be increasing physical temptation. It's natural to want to to express physical affection to someone that you've made that commitment to. I want to be with you for the rest of my life. Um, if it's not a little bit hard to maintain boundaries,
mm.
I'm a little concerned. If a guy
Right.
is saying I have to work really hard, I'm like, hmm. It raises other questions. And so my thought is do all of the work to decide now we're going to be exclusive because it's more likely to cause hurt if you're exclusive and break up.
Mm.
And then now pre-engagement, okay, I think this is going to work. Now it's going to work. Then I say get married. 4 months, 6 months, whatever it takes to get the church, get the dress, go
Mm.
on, and then get it done. But the whole process, I think, now this isn't in the Bible, so I don't make this a law. But if I know infatuation lasts 12 to 18 months, I like to see a couple be together at least a year before they get engaged. Um,
Mm.
18 months is even better because now you know I'm thinking clearly. I know this person's weaknesses. We have an exercise in that book. What are the three biggest weaknesses of this person? And if the weakness is, oh, they love me too much, I'm like, okay. Uh, because
Oh, poor thing.
the Bible says we all stumble in many ways. That's James
Mm.
3:2. And so the Bible tells me the person you're considering marrying stumbles in many ways. If you don't know how they stumble, you're either in idealization or you're blind. And I don't want you to marry in either one of those states.
Oh, wow, that's good. Well, as someone who does therapy, I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I definitely see kind of more premarital than the pre kind of engaged. But those words are really wise, because I think what you're bringing up is that's the stage to really start asking a lot of those big questions. Because you're right, when the engagement has been set, deposits have been made on venue and photography, right, and the rings on the finger, there may be more of a chance to overlook some things. So it's really kind of at that point, it's more like you should have confidence in that decision. A lot of this pre work, pre engagement is the
Yes.
time to explore a lot of those big questions.
A couple, now they weren't engaged yet, but they wanted some pastoral response, or they wanted just some pastoral interaction before they did get engaged. Now, this would have been a
Mm.
second marriage. They were both older, so they both had means and jobs. One liked to go to a very Pentecostal church that had sort of a bit of a prosperity gospel leaning. The other one grew up and loved her very conservative Baptist church. And because they liked each other, they would go to his church on Saturday night and her church on Sunday morning, which was fine. But then I started asking them about finances. I go, well, how's it going to work when he's giving some of your money to this other church? He goes, well, I don't like that. I think that's a cult. And
Mm.
I said, well, that's a strong word for somewhere you want to go every Saturday night.
Mm.
And I said, this he loved his church. She loved her church. And I said, how's this going to work? Going to do different services, knowing the other one isn't really engaged and probably even judging it. And because they both wanted to be involved in their church, which I think is essential for a great marriage, they eventually came to the realization we really like each other. We have a good time together, but our churches are a big part of our life. And if we can't merge that, we don't think we should get married.
Mm. Yeah, good advice. I mean, these are definitely insights for people who are in this stage to really think about how to open up some of these important conversations. Let's talk in the last part of our interview for a few moments about marriage. So, couples who are in the stage of maybe just being married briefly for, early stages of marriage, or maybe they've been married for 30, 40, 50 plus years. One of your most beloved books that I've mentioned here is Sacred Marriage. It was one of the first books of yours that I had read. For someone who's not read that book, just give us maybe a few sentence overview of what that book is really about, because the premise is really telling in how you approach this subject of marriage.
Yeah. The subtitle really captures it. What if God designed marriage to make us holy more than to make us happy? Now, I stress it's not instead of make us happy. John Wesley said, when we're pursuing holiness is when we're most likely to experience happiness. I'm sure, Heidi, you see this as a counselor. If people have pleasure addictions that are not healthy or holy, it makes them miserable. They have
True.
moments of pleasure, but they're miserable. Holiness preserves happiness. And the same thing is if I'm angry toward my wife, I'm going to have a less happy marriage than if I'm showing compassion, kindness, and patience toward my wife. So I'm a fan of holiness. And what I found is that marriage points out where I'm not. It is this gigantic mirror. I had this ideal version of myself. I got married, and it was like God held up the mirror. Okay, Gary, here's what you're really like. You thought you were Mr. Polite. You thought you were Mr. Patient. And you've got something like ice cube trays that are freaking you out. How spiritually mature are you that you're upset because the ice cube trays are empty again? And we couldn't afford an ice cube maker at the time. We were really poor for the first 15 years of our marriage. So it really looks at how God uses the challenges and difficulties of marriage to help us become more like Christ. So you appreciate the aspects of marriage that you might once have resented because you see the purpose. And the sacredness is all about how does God become a part of every day? For
Mm,
me, my primary motivation to love my wife. And look, she's beautiful, she's godly, by far my best friend. I love her mind, I love the way she reads and whatnot. But all of that isn't as powerful to me as the fact that she is God's daughter. And I
mm,
have two daughters. I also have a son. And nothing could make me happier than somebody loving on my daughters. And nothing could make me angrier than somebody ignoring or worse, abusing one of my daughters. And so, this notion of seeing my marriage as sacred, I,
mm.
when I first got married, Heidi, I may have been the most selfish person alive. And is my wife going to do this? I got married because I want that. I hope we can have this. And now my prayer more often at the end of the night is, God, have I honored you? Have I pleased you by the way I've loved your daughter today?
Mm.
Am I getting too busy? Am I denying her something? Am I not listening to her? Am I putting a hobby or my vocation over her? And I'm much happier in my marriage, pursuing holiness and worship in my marriage. So
Oh.
that's sacred marriage. It's really the foundational one that all the other books come out of.
Yeah, it's so rich. I can't say enough about that book. You referred to this, but I'm going to read it for our listeners. If I could pull out, Gary, one quote of yours that I think is my all-time favorite, it would be this one. And you write, I realized one of my primary forms of worship throughout the rest of my life would be honoring God by taking care of a woman who would always be in his divine mind, his little girl. It's that what you said, right? It's like, see, it's a perspective change, right? That the
Mhm.
marriage is more than just about you. It's more than just about your spouse. It's really about perspective of, wow, God is father. and
Yes.
and I'm and
It
whether
was
you're the husband or you're the wife, you are married to God's precious child. I love that just picture that gives to readers for sure.
two of the times that I felt closest to my wife was when she needed me most. She had a tumor growing on her left lung. We didn't know for sure whether it was cancerous until they got it out. It wasn't, and they're able to get it out. But it was quite a effort to get it out. And then she had a hip replacement a few years back. And with the hip replacement, she couldn't do anything. I
Mm.
mean, I had to help her get up. Just imagine it, to do anything. I had to
Right.
be there. It was really bad. It was supposed to take 90 minutes for her. It took 3 hours. Doctor said it was one of the worst things he had ever seen. And she was laid out and whatnot. And I remember I'm exhausted. I'm not getting any sleep. We stupidly did it on a Thursday, and I was preaching on the next Friday. It was Good Friday, which my daughter was in to watch her while I was preaching, but so I was getting no sleep and whatnot. But I remember like the third day, I'm getting all the water every time she has to get up or whatnot. And I see her sitting out in the sun because if my wife loves anything, it's lying in the sun. I mean,
Mm.
she's a very healthy, nature-oriented, um, naturopathic kind of person. And I just look, and she just looked so beautiful. And I think when you serve someone like that, because I'm thinking, God, I'm taking care of your little girl, right? This is right. I
Mm,
mean, if this was my daughter, this is how I'd want her to be cared for. And I could feel God's joy. I could feel God's pleasure. And I talked about being the most selfish person when I got married today. And it's just my heart. I few things give me as much pleasure as being able to pleasure and serve my wife.
mm.
If
I
I can
love that.
anticipate her needs, it just makes me as happy as anything else I do.
Mm. That's a beautiful testimony about God's transforming work
Yeah.
in us through marriage. Well, I know we're almost out of time, Gary. I want to just kind of get ready to wrap it up. But with this podcast that we've been talking about, a love that lasts, and today we took a journey together to explore a lot of your writing over the years that has touched on things like dating and premarital and even marriage. What I'd like to just kind of ask and end on is some encouragement that maybe you could give to couples who are really trying to build a love that lasts.
For me, I think two of the main pillars of marriage from a biblical perspective goes back to Matthew 6:33. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Where I see couples starting to fall apart is they become inwardly turned and they suffocate each other. Why don't you do this for me? Why don't you do that for me? And I'll ask these couples, have you ever prayed together, God, what can we do for you?
Mm,
Spiritual purpose, that the richest couples I know live for a purpose greater than themselves because selfishness gets boring. We were made to have lives of eternal meaning and purpose, and there's no better purpose and no better meaning than the kingdom of God. Now, you can be a sports team parent group couple, but you're not just trying to win games. You're trying to win lives for Jesus. You're represent. So I'm not saying it all has to be about church, but you have that sense of how do we seek first his kingdom? And then he says his righteousness. When Paul writes to the Colossians, I love chapter 3, when he basically says, take off sexual immorality, anger, rage, malice, slander, filthy language, and lying. All of those, as you know as a counselor, will destroy a marriage. And then he says,
true.
put on, here's what we forget. It's not just avoiding that. He says, put on compassion, kindness, gentleness, patience, and love.
Mm,
Imagine a marriage that gets rid of anger, rage, malice, sexual immorality, and lying. And now two people are pursuing compassion and kindness and gentleness and patience. That's not a marital skill. That's a spiritual journey that will lift your marriage to an entirely new place. And so I think those are two of the keys. Seek his kingdom, seek his righteousness. A third thing I would add is just from my book, Cherish. I've had so many couples that responded, and I just got an email today from a couple raising the bar from loving your spouse, which focuses you on your obligations, to loving
mm,
and cherishing your spouse. So now you're focused on the beauty, the excellence, the wonder, and worth of your spouse. Creates an entirely different dynamic in marriage. Um, in in April, the London Marathon saw the first two runners break 2 hours in a marathon as far as a
okay.
real race without special conditions. And I remember 20 years ago, because I've been really into marathons, people thought, no, that's a line that could never be crossed. And I bet you we're going to see it happen all the time now. Just like they said it once, you could never break the 4 minute mile. And now we have
Right.
people running 3:40s. And so I think in marriage, when you raise the bar to, I don't want to just love my wife, serve, sacrifice, be committed. I want to cherish my
Mm,
spouse. It creates an entirely different dynamic. And it's one that I'm excited to talk about at this stage in my life.
yeah. Well, blessings to you, Gary and Lisa, as you have kind of allowed even your marriage to be an inspiration for your writing and God's transforming work in that. I know as someone who has read your books and others who have as well, there is so much to take through your writings. All these different books that you have written really are a beautiful testimony about how we can look at relationships differently being shaped and molded more into who God is calling us to be. So I have enjoyed this conversation today. It has been a wonderful time to visit with you. And I just want to close out to all our listeners, just encouragement to check out some of Gary's books. You certainly will walk away with some wonderful things that will bless your relationship. So, Gary, I just want to say thank you and all the best to you.
Well, Heidi, I want to thank you. Just as a writer, speaker, and pastor, solid counselors are worth their weight in gold. It's a difficult occupation. I want to encourage your listeners and viewers to pray for you. The average career span of a counselor is about 10 years because they get buried, just carrying those burdens and dealing with it, and often invited into some really dark realities.
Yeah.
But a book
Thank you.
isn't going to heal a marriage. You know that. A sermon isn't going to heal a marriage. Counselors who will take somebody by the hand, meet with them week by week or for many hours at a time, those are God's servants. So I applaud what you're doing. I'm grateful for what you're doing. And thank you for your ministry to God's kingdom.